NBC's Vaughn Hilliard is reporting from Phoenix. CNBC's Deirdre Bosa is reporting from San Francisco. Basil Smykel is still with us. Okay, Vaughn, Donald Trump appears to be striking while the iron is hot post-verdict with his base, as I said. Where is the support coming from in this big fundraising swing?
Right. Tonight it's going to be in San Francisco. You said it potentially upwards of excess of $10 million here. This is in the heart of Silicon Valley. And for Donald Trump, ultimately donors who are able to contribute potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars each. For Donald Trump, this is going to be crucial here. After an enormous fundraising month in the month of May, especially in the days following his guilty verdict, when the campaign says it raised in excess of $40 million, it is in the super PAC, hauling in tens of million dollars itself. This for Donald Trump is an opportunity heading into the summer, not only to get on the campaign trail. This is his first stop in the state of Arizona since October of 2022. He'll be holding a rally in Las Vegas on Sunday. But in between these two public events, he has a fundraiser tonight again in San Francisco. He's got fundraisers lined up in Newport Beach in California, as well as in Beverly Hills tomorrow. And, of course, a fundraiser in Las Vegas as well. This is a crucial point in time here ahead of the summer before really the final months of the campaign and the time to be actually on the trail become all the more crucial. We are less than 5 months out here from the general election here at this point. So for Donald Trump and his allies being able to haul in and be able to attempt to catch up to the cash advantage that the Biden campaign and the Democratic Party currently holds over the RNC and the Trump campaign, these are crucial days and crucial stops out west for the former president, especially coming off of his guilty convictions in New York. Chris.
Deirdre, you're outside the house where tonight's Trump fundraiser is being held. We think of San Francisco as the bastion of liberalism. We think of Silicon Valley as a place where Joe Biden and Democrats have done very well. So what's happening here?
Well, there's been a real shift, especially over the last 8 years. And part of the reason for that is that the Republican Party is seen as friendlier or at least less hostile towards the tech industry. And you can look at the Biden versus Trump administrations. Biden and his regulators have been tough on tech, whether that be a crackdown on cryptocurrencies, lawsuits from the DOJ and FTC on big tech or gig economy workers. Then you look back at the Trump administration, there was corporate tax cuts that benefited some of the mega caps. Some of his harsh talk on social media platforms never really came to fruition, and he even carved out exemptions within those China tariffs. So behind me is the house where the fundraiser is going to take place tonight. It belongs to a prominent venture capitalist. His name is David Sacks. He's going to be holding it with Chamath Palihapitiya. And, you know, it is $3,000 $5,000 a ticket, $300,000 for a VIP ticket. As you mentioned, they're expected to raise some $12 million or more from the Trump campaign. But some other folks say that it's just becoming more acceptable to be a Republican in San Francisco. In fact, we just saw someone walk by in full Republican gear, which is truly not a common sight in San Francisco. You called it a bastion of liberalism, of Democratic Party. That is very true. So there's a shift happening. David Sacks, who's hosting the fundraiser tonight, says that he hopes this event will allow more supporters to come out of the shadows and support Trump publicly and economically.
Basil, Trump is in San Francisco just 24 hours after Vice President Harris was there. That's her hometown, right? She told donors it's time we have to roll up our sleeves. I mean, obviously, they're very aware of the number of big money donors, CEOs, who might have reasonably been expected to be in the Biden camp, who have made a decision, much to the chagrin and sometimes surprise of Democrats, that they're going to support Donald Trump. What's going on here from your political perspective?
You know, there was an expectation that he would get some low-dollar donations during the trial because he used it as a rallying point, right? But we saw an announcement from a number of big donors, including investment bankers, that they were going to start turning their attention to Donald Trump. One of the reasons that they did that was actually in a response to what they said was this DEI movement, because you could see the language and hear what they were saying. They were talking about DEI means did not earn it, and this sort of backlash to that, which I believe, going to Deirdre's point, is what a lot of them consider as a regulation. They have to do it. They feel it's mandatory that they do this. It's a response to that, among other things, because one of the other trends that we're seeing is the increased attempts at unionization in a lot of these big companies. Think about Apple, Starbucks, Amazon, for example, all of these companies that, these tech companies in particular, that are now starting to see more worker activity and organizing. So there's all of this is a response to a lot of opportunities that Democrats have found a way to take advantage of to kind of mobilize their base.
You know, Brendan Buck, who was an aide to Paul Ryan and John Boehner, and has been extremely critical of Donald Trump, was talking in the last hour about how he thinks the Democrats missed an opportunity. They stayed quiet for too long. Joe Biden potentially stayed quiet, but Democrats, the DNC, stayed quiet for too long. While Donald Trump, under a gag order, was coming out every day, sometimes multiple times a day, at his trial and embedding this idea that this was an unfair prosecution, things that I've even heard Democrats say, like, why are they going after him on this? It doesn't seem like it's big enough. Did Democrats miss an opportunity? And are they going to see that ultimately in the fundraising numbers?
Yeah, I don't know that they missed an opportunity. I mean, Joe Biden came out and challenged Donald Trump to a debate, said, hey, I think you're free on Wednesdays, in part because they believe that if there was any kind of conviction, even on a few of those counts, this is something that he'd be able to bring up in the debate. So I think there was a good strategy on the part of the Biden campaign to sort of bait Donald Trump. I do believe that enough of the Democratic surrogates were out there talking about it and raising money from it. There's still a Biden money advantage, and that money advantage goes to the ability of his campaign to be able to talk to independent voters, talk to disaffected Republicans, to actually outreach to more people. So I do think there's still an advantage. I don't know that you would necessarily want to keep hitting on the trial, because at the same time, you've got to also talk about the good things that you're doing. So those two things need to be in place at the same time.
Basil Smikle, Vaughn Hilliard, Deirdre Bosa, thank you all very much.